So it's been 19 years of Nigeria's democracy and 3 years of President Buhari's administration. Your thoughts first on what democracy is serving to Nigeria via the APC government.
Well, we should not lose sight of the biggest gain of the APC government so far, which is the fact that we removed an incumbent party. Your democracy is never really strengthened until power can actually be transferred between one party to the next via peaceful means, via the ballot box. So that was a significant victory. And as hard as things seem now, we should always remember that history does not necessarily move in a straight line. Basically, you are going to make mistakes and then you try to correct yourself. Democracy ultimately is evolutionary, not revolutionary. So yes, things appear to have gone off the rails, but ultimately, we have to just keep at it, keep learning, keep modifying. One thing that should be clear to most Nigerians and all observers now is that this American-style democracy is not exactly suited to us. So we will have to evolve something at some point that is more suited to us as a people.
Right. When you say it's not suited to Nigeria, are you referring to the electorate in a sense here? Because that's what I think many people suggest to me, that the poverty is more or less a formula where anyone that can simply serve that just before the elections has a good chance of winning. So how do we modify that democracy, if you like?
There are two things here. The poverty is a factor. The educational levels of the electorate, the ability to make informed decisions. But it will be a bit arrogant of those of us who think we're educated because we also make mistakes as well. But one key thing that should be a takeaway is the fact that there's too much power in the executive branch. It's the entire democratic system in the country is skewed towards the executive branch. So having somebody who is not very versed as the head of the executive can actually do quite some damage to the entire system. And that's something that we should look at. We need to find a way to diffuse the powers. So, for example, the police, law enforcement should not be under direct control of the executive. As we've seen, the current Inspector General of Police, as an example, he's clearly not the best man for the job, but he has sat there. So security in the country, despite what the executive want us to believe, security is going through a very tough patch at the moment. If we had the security services, the internal security mechanism, under something more independent, or even under the judiciary, I dare say that we would have had a better shot at improving internal security.
Now, Tata, talking about poverty as a major weakness for Nigeria's democracy, you had an interesting thought on the amendment of qualifications for voter rights. You were talking about maybe abolishing or considering retracting the universal adult suffrage.
Well, that's a view that I've held in the past. I now hold a modified section of that view because, first, trying to abolish universal suffrage will be disastrous. There will be chaos. People will kick against it. Secondly, it's remember that I said earlier that that those of us who think we're educated, I use those words very deliberately, that we shouldn't look down on our poorer compatriots. Sometimes some of the decisions they make are actually practical within their circumstances. However, I no longer agree, given the nature of Nigeria, the way Nigeria is constituted at the moment, I do not agree that we should all line up to vote for one man, because there are all sorts of interests at play. I think something where we have indirect democracy, where we have people voting just for the closest representative, the person who best represents their immediate interests, will be a more practical adoption of democracy, the more practical modification of democracy to suit our own cultural circumstances.
Let's talk a bit about the performance of the president. It's been 3 years, obviously, and I was just looking at some of the statistics. So the stock market is up maybe about 15% since he became president. We know, of course, that inflation has been trending lower, but there's still that sense that this government hasn't done great for business. And I just wanted you to comment on that. And it's interesting, the point about the rating of the government right now, which is at 41%. I was just taking a look at former President Jonathan's rating just at the time he was leaving office, it was at 42%. So effectively, the rating is lower than Jonathan when he was leaving office. And of course, we know he lost the election. So your perspective on what this government has done for business?
Well, let's start with the stock market. Yes, it is true that the stock market is about 15.6% higher from when the current government took over. But what we should look at, because I like to look at things from a larger picture, looking at it just from a hard May 29, 2015 point is a bit deceptive, because the stock market was actually coming down up until that point and still went down before it started coming up. So as it is, we haven't quite yet reached the end of 2013 numbers. That is very important. It's a very important context to add. Secondly, we have to accept that yields in Nigeria are much higher, which tells us that Nigeria is a higher risk environment. Most of the investors coming in are foreign portfolio investors. For a country like Nigeria at this point, we need more of foreign direct investment. It's something that we can't run away from. We need people who are ready to commit to the country for the long term, not people who just come, pack money, and are ready to...
You're saying the policy environment has not stimulated
the policy environment has not stimulated the more long-term people. I mean, there's been a lot of policy uncertainty within in this government. Now, talking about inflation, inflation is on a downward spiral. But the question we should ask, what was inflation at May 29, 2015? It was single digits. Now we have a situation where it is still double digits. It's been falling for the past 15 months, yes, but we must keep in mind that it's falling from a much higher base. So that's something. It's not something to crow about. We are not yet out of the woods. Now, regarding the president's approval rating, yes, at this point in time, it's lower than the former president's rating was when he left office. But bear in mind that when this president came into office, his approval rating was higher than 70%. It was almost
tremendous goodwill.
Yeah, tremendous goodwill, which has been squandered. And so the question that we should be asking is, why was this goodwill squandered? The three linchpins of what President Buhari wanted to achieve when he came into office: security, anti-corruption, and the economy. Let's be honest, has he achieved those? Let's start with security. Boko Haram, we've moved from they're technically defeated to, in his speech yesterday, he said they've been degraded. He no longer says technically defeated, because it is clear to everybody, every observer, that we have not fully gotten a handle on the Boko Haram problem. I have been in convoys. You cannot move from Maiduguri to Damboa on your own. That's an issue that needs to. So we need to be very serious about this, and we need to stop this obsession with defeating them militarily, because there's a reason why Boko Haram, the three different factions of Boko Haram, keep getting recruits. There's a reason why they are still moving on. Still on security, the pastoral conflict in the middle belt of the country can no longer be ignored. Just this morning, overnight, there was an attack in around Burning Gwari in Kaduna. It hasn't yet, so I'm helping you break something. Zamfara State, it's a nightmare. These are serious issues. We had a situation where 2 naval personnel were kidnapped in Kaduna State and somehow made their way out of it after trekking for some hours with the kidnappers. These are things that need to be looked at. The Niger Delta seems to be pacified just because the government resumed the presidential amnesty program. The moment, and that's a potential nightmare for any future government, because as things are, the moment that flow stops, they will pick up arms again. Anti-corruption, there's a perception which is born by what we all see, that the anti-corruption fight is one-sided. If you are within the president's inner circle, if you are one of his friends, they don't come after you so much. But if you're in the opposition, and let's be factual here, the APC has its own internal opposition, or the PDP, then they come after you. That doesn't send a very good signal.
Right.
Okay, Cheta, thank you very much.